All right. And we are live with Tim Miller from The Bulwark. Tim, there's so many things I want to talk to you about. I want to talk about The Bulwark and what you guys are doing. I want to talk about the Epstein stuff. Maybe just to start, I sort of recently, interviewed both Jake Tapper and Jonathan Allen about their respective books, Original
Good for
Sin
you.
and
Good for
Flight.
you. I put a ban on those books on the Bulwark podcast. Nothing against any of the authors. I was just like, the last thing I want to do and my audience wants to hear is reliving 2024. So good
No,
for
I
you for
know.
doing that because it's important. I just don't want to do it. I'm just taking a
And that's
break.
why I want to talk to you. My thought was, there are a lot of things that I could say about the motivation for writing these books, the timing of their release. Right, I could a long list of stuff. But in reading them and seeing how they're sourced, and my takeaway is sort of like, if even 10% of the subject matter is true, the Democratic Party's got some real problems to figure out here. And I'm curious your take as someone who, advised Republicans, and now I don't even know where you consider that you occupy right now, but sort of I consider you like a centrist guy generically. What's your take on the kind of state of play right now?
Yeah, well, welcome to Substack. I'm glad we're doing this. We're off our natural platform of YouTube, and I've already
Yeah.
seen Tom Jocelyn, our man down there, did a great interview with Bill Kristol on Sunday on our Substack. So this is fun to do it. Man, I think that the Democratic Party, like if you look at these books and look back at 2024, like has a couple of different problems, and some of them persist, and some of them were kind of unique to 2024. The Biden part was pretty unique to 2024. I think that Biden himself put the party in a pretty bad place. I just, regardless of what you think about it, he just his decision to run again, and his decision to kind of not be very public, and then to have so many eggs in the basket of this debate, and then give the worst debate performance in history. Like none of that stuff's going to happen again in 2028. Like presumably the Democrats will not have a 80-year-old candidate running and who struggles to enunciate points on the debate stage. So we could talk about that more if you want, but I think that was like a real issue that the party had that was pretty unique to 24. I think that there's some subplots in those books, that you can see some of the other issues. I think that the party itself, and part of this is Trump kind of. I'm sympathetic to it because Trump kind of put the Democrats in this position of being the party of like defending institutions, of being the responsible ones, of being, of defending the status quo from this monster that wants to tear down democracy. And while all that is true and right, I think it got them misaligned from where the public is. And the public is pretty mad about stuff, particularly working class people, and I think that upper middle class people have their complaints, but, Democrats did pretty well with that crowd. Working class folks are pretty pissed, and they're pissed about a number of things. In 24, most acutely inflation, but also just kind of a feeling that the system is failing them. And I think that the Democrats basically for 3 straight cycles put up presidential candidates that were like, we want to help you, but like within the confines of the system, right? And the Republicans are putting up somebody that's like, I want to burn everything down, and I care, and we're going to go after the people you hate. And obviously, it's all phony and fake, but like you can see why it resonated, right? And I think if you look back at the 2024 books and like a lot of the problems that Kamala faced when she got in were either generated by Biden himself and his poor actions, or by this like feeling of the need to kind of defend, to be the responsible one, to defend the institutions, to defend the Biden legacy, to defend, right? And I just think that in 2024, like and going ahead to 2028, like people want outsiders, people want folks that are shake things up, people want folks that are going to let it rip. They don't want, conventional and cautious. And Kamala, for all of her great traits, is kind of conventional and cautious, So I don't know. That would be my like quick summary of what my lessons are from 24. I think there's some ideological stuff, some issues we could talk about too, but like from a brand positioning standpoint, I think that'd be my takeaway. What about you? You're the one that interviewed them.
Well, I mean, it's so hard because my audience was really split, and I got a bunch of angry emails from people saying, how dare you even have these people on? And it's like, well, what I do is I talk to people, and then I try to evaluate the substance of what they say and their motivations. And it's sort of what I do. I've never agreed with the don't have them on, unless I just personally don't want to do it. It sounds like you didn't want to do it, which I
Right.
totally respect on a
Yeah.
personal level.
Yeah, no,
So,
I
so
just and nothing against against Jake, or anything, but yeah, I just was like, I just don't want to, like, rehash it. Like, well, like, had the news been more boring, maybe I'd do it, right? But there's a lot happening in the news. So
interestingly, like
I hear you, though, but yeah, I'm not saying you shouldn't have platformed them or anything. I understand. Like, I think that's kind of a silly complaint.
one of my reactions, if I'm frank, was there was recognition. I went to the White House twice in 2024. I went in March when Kamala Harris was not yet the nominee and had like a creator sort of thing
Yeah.
that she talked to us for 45 minutes. And then I went in December and it was basically Biden comms people. And then Biden came in for like 15 minutes essentially. And it's so hard to say it any other way. The stuff that was described in the books about how his schedule was managed, about how he was protected, I saw it firsthand. It was exactly the way it was, where it was like the staff was keeping him cloistered. They really limited the scope of our interactions, and there was a risk aversion that went above and beyond anything I've experienced, like with a senator. And so my takeaway was kind of like, man, until June 27th, I believed that on balance, Biden was probably the most likely to defeat Trump. In other words, I had calculated on June 26th, if he just drops out today, I think Trump obviously wins. On June 27th, by about 9:15 p.m. Eastern time, my view had changed. But a lot of it was the recognition that that was probably the state of play before that debate. And I recognized the techniques that were used to prevent us from knowing that. So there was
Yeah.
anger in a sense.
I have a lot of anger about it. It's another reason why I don't like. I have anger towards Trump, and I try to channel it towards that. And the Biden stuff comes up. I went off on Hunter last week on the pod. I just a lot of I get pushback from this from people who like really respect and like Joe Biden, and he obviously had a lot of tragedy in his life and gave to public service a lot. He also was just unbelievably selfish in the last year, in a very important year. And like the amount of time that was spent caring and talking about his legacy, his ego, and protecting him, and what, like defending the record and making sure that, we had to talk about he's the greatest. I just think and then deciding to stay in the race was very hubristic. I just think that there was an insane amount of hubris and ego that led you to thinking that all of these sort of machinations were worth it because he is, he deserves it, or because in some cases they thought that he was best positioned to win. And so like that is the more reasonable, I guess, defense. And you still see this from people. I have people in my mentions up till today being like, if Biden would have won. And I think that is objectively wrong based on every metric that we have. We'll never know. You don't get to run a race. And I think every like qualitative and quantitative and anecdote data that I have is that Biden would have gotten his just absolutely annihilated. Who knows? But I just think that the behavior was not putting first the protection of the country and service to the country and the protection against Donald Trump, and instead putting first like his parochial interests. And I think that's really sad, and it does make me mad.
If we now kind of think forward and talk a little bit about Epstein, and in a sense, I'm so sick of the topic, but also I think in the last
I'm not.
6 hours,
So here we
there's
go.
a
So
lot
this
of
is the
interesting
difference
stuff going
between
on.
our shows. I am not sick of this topic at all. We could do the next 45 minutes on Epstein if you want.
Well, what's interesting is I recently did a live with Heather Cox Richardson,
Okay.
who I did not expect to come in and go, oh, this Epstein thing is huge. As a historian, I believe that this Epstein thing is huge. And that's exactly what she said. And there were a couple of reasons, but one of the big ones was that this seems to be having a divisive effect within MAGA, that voting for the anti-war president who bombed Iran hasn't really done it. Voting for the guy who would build the wall Mexico would pay for, and of course he didn't do it. None of those things got the sort of purchase to get MAGA divided in the way that it seems to have divided them so far. What's your, like, in 2 months, will this still be a story? In 3 months, will it be a story? What do you think?
I think because of the way that they've managed it, this is going to be a story until 2027. Because I think if the Democrats take back the House, they're going to have hearings about it. And I think that they should model, whatever you think about the merits of the Benghazi hearings. I think probably the first one did have merits. The next 38 probably were unmerited, right? But it did have a positive political effect for good, and I think the Democrats should look to that. I think there are legitimate things to look into. This is a cover, like, to me, what has changed about this story? And some people are like, they ask me, like, why? Like, you weren't talking about this 2 months ago, or Biden wasn't dealing with it 3 years ago. And my response to that is the Epstein story itself is a massive story and a tragedy. And it had a lot of coverage, and just because, that lets some that you watch or that might maybe not have been covering it, got a lot of attention, a lot of quarters. Yeah, in conspiracy quarters, but also in more casual, kind of podcast, news adjacent quarters. Um, but it became a massive political story because of how they handled it. Like, they are participating in a cover up. Like, what are they covering up? I don't know. Like, are they covering up that there is really damaging stuff about Trump in there? Maybe. I'm a little bit skeptical of that, right? You'd think that would be leaked out by now. Is it just kind of damaging stuff about Trump in there? Almost certainly, right? Is it damaging stuff about friends of his, donors of his? Maybe, probably, right? And so they are engaging in a cover up on behalf of people that were at some level involved with a child sex trafficker. And they're doing it for political ends, and I think this puts him in a very political box, right? Like, he's now just it's kinda like Nixon, right? It's kind of like any of the cover it's Iran-Contra, it's Lewinsky, right? Like, it's more of a traditional, like, political scandal, and he is no longer kind of like the outsider, he is just like a politician, a slimy politician trying to protect powerful people, and I think that really cuts against his brand in a way that a lot of this other stuff that we all were outraged about didn't, right? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. And
January 6th did not
I'm
cut
curious
against his
your
brand,
take, like,
you know?
the sense I'm getting, it's funny how fast this stuff moves, but like the sense I'm getting over the last 8 hours of video of Trump, as he sort of started to say, I stopped talking to Epstein because he took some employees from me. And then he was asked, were any of those employees or were any of these people under 18? And he goes, yeah, I think they might have been. The sense that I'm getting is that Trump is probably aware that he knew of a lot of stuff he stayed silent on. And I have as like you're saying, I don't think necessarily that he was a client in the sense of having committed crimes or whatever. Maybe he was, but I haven't seen any evidence. But the way he's sort of like explaining why they had this falling out, to me, speaks to he's aware that he said nothing about a lot of stuff he knew about. And maybe that's what he's afraid of coming out. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't well, he's also lying about that, right? I think that's it, like, this is just happening in this last couple hours, but he was, talking about, man, I don't wanna butcher her last name, but Virginia, the staffer at Mar-a-Lago,
Giuffre, yeah, yeah.
Giuffre, yeah,
I
Virginia
think
Giuffre,
Giuffre, yeah, I'm not sure.
yeah. Um, Virginia worked at Mar-a-Lago. And then Epstein hired her away, and she was part of a really kind of gruesome sort of sex trafficking part of and where a lot of people are complicit in really bad behavior towards her, which is horrible. But Trump's story, like, is like, okay, well, Epstein was taking people from me, and that's why I got mad at him. Which, by the way, is different from the White House's original story, which is that Trump said Epstein was a creep, and so
Right.
he said he couldn't come to Mar-a-Lago. So it already changed the story once. And then today, reporters are like, "Are you talking about Virginia when you say that Epstein stole staff from you?" And he says, "Yes." And by the way, he shows no empathy or sympathy to what she went through in answering yes. But it also turns out that is like, well, it's not a lie that he took her from Mar-a-Lago, but the timing doesn't work. That happened in 2000. Epstein was banned from Mar-a-Lago 4 years later. So it wasn't that. It's like, whatever the truth is of why him and Joshua Epstein had a falling out, it wasn't this.
Yeah.
So what is it? And so I just think that Trump's handling of this has also just been like his usual tricks aren't working. You know, like the usual tricks of, oh, it was just locker room talk, or, oh, like what, look at, I'm going to change the subject, because like they've mismanaged, the disbursement of information on a topic that his own media allies who usually run cover for him on this stuff actually. actually care about or actually have covered enough that they have to protect their credibility on. So I don't know. What exactly they're covering up, I don't know, but it's not pretty. And we know that they're covering up something because we know that they have searched through the files for mentions of Trump and flagged them.
What is at this point, I don't know if you agree, but to set up this next question, are we on the same page that essentially no matter what comes out, it's not going to end Trump's presidency a day short of when it's scheduled to end? Do we agree on that?
We agree on that. And there's a funny conspiracy view that JD Vance and and Peter Thiel and the tech bros are not hating this, and wouldn't mind a scandal that would push Trump to the side and let them kind of consolidate power. I don't really believe that theory. It's kind of funny and juicy and something to think about. Stuff's coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't think it's actually JD Vance. I think it's, and I don't actually even think it's like Elon. I just think that having been in a lot of these sorts of stories, back when I was a PR guy for candidates, this stuff has a life of its own. If you get caught up in something, then people start to look and pay attention to things that they weren't before. And I think that is really what is driving this, is just kind of like a traditional feeding frenzy. But no, anyway, no matter what happens, I think Trump is we're stuck with him.
So given that, what is the potential impact of what we might learn? Is it'll hurt Republicans in 26 and 28? Is it like what is it Trump's legacy?
Yeah. Um, well, I mean, I think that just on the actual substance of what we might learn, I don't know, like there might be legal consequences for people, probably not Trump. But I do think it's preposterous to think that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were the only people that were involved in this effort, right? So there could be actual consequences for people. Politically speaking, I think the potential consequences of fragmenting of MAGA, and I don't mean, and I mean it in the broadest sense. Let me rephrase that: a fragmenting of the Trump coalition, because I think that MAGA eventually comes back around to everything. He was right when he said Fifth Avenue back in 2016, and it's like essentially a cult. And some people leave cults, but the preponderance of people stay, right? And so I think that the core MAGA base will be resilient in the face of this, but the broader coalition, I think, has real um, potential for fragmenting. And if you think about the newest people that came in, the kind of lefty horseshoe people, the RFK Tulsi crowd, they cared about Epstein, and they also wanted Trump to be a peacenik on foreign policy. He's failing them on both.
Yep.
And you could see them kind of reverting back, either, I don't know, to the Democrats, or just no longer being part of a Republican coalition in the future. And then you have an even bigger group, which is more of the younger, non-ideological men who, for shorthand, we'll call the manosphere type people, who went with Trump across races, black, brown, white, and who also are just looking at Trump and seeing him do this cover up and be like, this guy's a fucking politician like everybody else. Like, I didn't like him because I'm a conservative or I'm a MAGA nationalist. Like, I liked him because he seemed like he was not a politician. He's going to go in there and cause problems. And you can just already see the disillusionment. I know, like, you can see it in Rogan and Theo Vaughn
Yep.
and Andrew Schultz. Like, I don't like, and that is a significant part of his coalition. So I think that is like the political ramification of this. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And one of the things I've been interested in looking at, and I kind of want to hear from you as someone who worked in the PR and the messaging side, is from reading a lot of political books, it seems as though it's common that when there's some crisis, when the messaging comms and PR people get together, tell me if I'm wrong, it seems like it's common to game out every possibility. What if we went with this story? What if we went with that story? And so, like, some of the anecdotes we've learned about Harris's staff when Biden was in this period of, is he going to run, is he going to not, was like, okay, let's have a plan for if he drops out and endorses you. Let's have a plan for if he drops out and doesn't. Let's have a plan for if he dies. Here, what you
Yeah,
see, they had all these plans. Can you talk a little bit about, like, when you were doing this stuff, did you game out even ridiculous ideas just to go, let's game it out to see what would we say? And then people go, okay, that's crazy. We're not going to do that, but we've thought about it.
yeah. Not really. To me, would be the honest answer to that. I mean, we definitely, like, a version of this, like in a campaign setting, which is not a PR issue like this, but is more like, we gamed out a lot of different ways to deal with Trump. in 2016. That's the Jeb campaign, and like kind of crazy. Like, what if he does? What if he says this crazy thing on stage, right? Because like Trump himself is very unpredictable. But like most of these types of stories, like there aren't that many types of options. You got door A, which is you rip the Band-Aid off and tell do sunlight and tell the truth and say, guys, here it is, whatever, right? There's door B, which is like, we're going to stonewall and try to ride this thing out, and eventually people will stop caring and they'll care about something else. Or we'll give door C, where we like give an excuse or an explanation that we hope right? Like that's kind of it. Like those are the options. Like this is a very unique case where it's like, you don't even know what's in there. You know what I mean? Like I think back to Jeb and like he had like one example of this is kind of similar is Florida has a very open sunshine laws, and Jeb was a big emailer, so he emailed like for there's 10 years worth of emails, and we're like, who the fuck knows what's in there, right? And so like there was like a planning of like, what if he sent an email? You know what I mean? So that is, I guess, a more similar version to this, and but I don't even know if they can do that because this is all being driven by Trump.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's no way that the strategy they've put forth would be the strategy that Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita like have come up with, or the strategists or whatever. Like
Well,
they're
that's
just
the question of
reacting to what
when you
Trump
get
posts.
simultaneously the files don't exist and my name's in them, but only
Yeah.
because Comey put it in there.
Right. Yeah.
I can't imagine that's Susie Wiles.
Yeah. No. I think this is all Trump, and they're just kind of live reacting to the principle. So so luckily, I mean, they've been to the White House, so I guess not luckily for me. But luckily, I never had any candidates that were just like randomly posting crazy shit, and I just had to figure out how to deal with it. So I think it's a unique situation.
I want to talk a little bit in the time we have left just about like what you all are doing at the Bulwark, how you're growing, Substack. I mean, the success you all are having. I see that you're doing the live events.
Yeah.
I don't even know what size team there is at this point, but like what would you say is the key thing that you've done that has allowed you to grow so quickly?
I appreciate that, man. I think that like the key things were, one, that the fact that now we've kind of expanded beyond this, and we have people from a lot of different backgrounds, like ideologically and experience wise. But like the original core group were never Trumpers, were people who were kind of cast out of the party or cast out of their magazine, in the case of the Weekly Standard. And I think that because we were cast out of the party, because we didn't really have a realistic hope of getting back in, and because we didn't really think that the Democrats, like it wasn't like a hope that I was going to be comms director for Hillary Clinton or whatever in 2016. So like when this all started, it was like, we might as well just say what we really think. Like we might as well just be honest, and we might as well just be candid, and like, we'll see, and maybe this will turn into something, maybe it won't. And like when we started, it was kind of a flyer. It was like a side project for a lot of people that were involved. And I think that worked, right? Like it just worked. It's what people want, like is authenticity or whatever. It's a little eye-rolling and cliche, but people want, right now they're craving people that are just telling them what they really think, showing their real feelings. And so I think that ethos like worked. And then as we've expanded, like we're really only bringing in people who are committed to that, right? Like we've tried to expand to do more journalism, and we have good traditional journalists alongside kind of whatever our podcast commentary folks who are focusing on Substack, and Lauren Egan's writing about the Democrats, John Cohn's writing about healthcare, et cetera. But there's some reporters that wanted to come that just aren't a fit because they like don't want to do it. They don't want to say what they really, you know what I mean? They want to be reporters, neutral, and that isn't what we do. So I think that is like that ethos has really worked. And the YouTube stuff, look, man, you were ahead of the game on all this. So while we're complimenting each other, you were there first. I think there's a big demand out there in the space for kind of middle, center left, anti-Trump. I think YouTube was really dominated by MAGA, and then secondarily by left folks. And like there wasn't a lot of other stuff out there. A lot of people were cutting the cord. There's this huge engagement in politics and interest because of all the crazy stuff that's happening with Biden's age and the assassination attempt and Trump's back. And so I think that we got kind of, and that part I think is lucky. Like I think we got on and decided to commit to YouTube and try it at a time where there was a spot in the marketplace for it. And so that, and then also the thing that you do well is we just post a lot of stuff.
Well, you know what's funny
there's
about
a lot
that
of content.
I'm always sort of like loosely mentoring a few people that are trying to get into this. And the number one piece of advice I give, which they almost never follow, is forget about what lights you buy. Don't worry about getting a PR person.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter what camera you get. Like if you're doing 5 hours a week of content or 1 hour a week or whatever, you've got to commit to that and you've got to do it and post it everywhere. All of the other stuff flows downhill from that. And so when people come to me and they're like overly focused on how do you do ad sales or do I need a stream deck or what about this? I'm like, it's just the content. You just got to commit to the content. And I think that that's kind of what you're picking up on.
Yeah, volume and being people want, people get in a relationship with you if you're being real with them. And so they want your reaction to stuff. And I want to hear from what the audience thinks about stuff, right? There's a little bit of a two-way street. Like the piece of advice I got, which is very similar to that when I was being mentored by a couple of buddies who are in sports podcasting. I was like, what like, I'm taking up this podcast. What's the daily podcast? What's your advice? Their main advice was like, you got to do it every day. You don't, and you also got to do it when big stuff is happening. Like people
Right.
want to hear from you immediately. And like the example one of the guys gave that I just won't forget is he's like, I'd like to get drunk on Thanksgiving with my family and then eat a bunch of turkey and like hang out. He's like, but I do NFL podcasting. So I don't do that. I'm sober on Thanksgiving and I'm with my family, but I'm watching the games. And then as soon as the games are over, I'm taping, because people want to hear my thoughts about what happened that day. And that's kind of silly compared to politics, but like the principle is the same, and so I think that's been working for us, and I appreciate everybody's kind of effort on that.
Well, listen, if you're here because you follow me on Substack, make sure you're following Tim and the Bulwark. If I'm the new guy here because you follow Tim, I'd be honored if you also follow me. And we're going to keep in touch. There's so much going on. I do feel that this is a critical time with at least 2 or 3 important inflection points. And it's always good to talk to you, Tim.
Man, I appreciate it very much. I'm glad we were able to do this. Let's do it again soon.
All right, take care. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Everybody.